I woke up from heart surgery not knowing what day it was. The nurses said I had been out longer than expected. My chest felt like someone had pressed a brick against it and left it there. The first thing I thought about was my bed, my own bed, the one I had slept in for 22 years. I just wanted to get back to it, pull the blanket up, and breathe slowly until the world felt right again. What I did not know yet was that my son had already given that bed away. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to think about something. If you had just survived a surgery that could have killed you, what would you need most when you got home? Safety. A familiar space. The feeling that someone had held things together while you were away. Think about what it would mean to come home and find out that none of that was waiting for you. Hold that thought. Stay with me through this whole story because what happened next changes everything you think you understand about the word family. My name is Jack. I was 63 years old when my cardiologist told me I needed open heart surgery. He did not say it in a dramatic way. He said it the way you tell someone their car needs a new engine. Calm, direct, no room for argument. He showed me the scans, pointed to the blockage, and said the surgery needed to happen within 6 weeks or the risk would climb significantly. I sat in that office chair and nodded. I told him I understood. Then I drove home, sat in my kitchen, and stared at the wall for about 40 minutes before I made myself a cup of tea and picked up the phone. I called my son first. His name is Derek. He was 38 at the time, living about 20 minutes away with his wife Nora and their 2 kids. Derek and I had always had a complicated relationship. I would not say we were close in the way I had hoped we would be, but we talked. We saw each other at holidays. He called me on my birthday, usually. We were family in the way that some families are family, which means we were connected but not always warm. I told him what the doctor said. He went quiet for a moment and then said that was serious and that he would come over that weekend. I said that would be good. He came over on Sunday, sat at my kitchen table, drank 1 cup of coffee and left after about an hour. Before he left, he asked me if I had a will. I told him I did. He nodded and said good. Then he left. I stood at the window and watched his car pull out of the driveway. My daughter Yvette called the same night I told Derek. She lives in another state about a 6-hour drive away. She cried a little when I told her, which made me feel both loved and guilty at the same time. She asked if she should come. I told her not yet, that I had the pre-op appointments to get through first and that I would need her more after the surgery. She asked me every day in the 2 weeks before the operation if I was eating properly, sleeping enough, and staying away from salt. She sent me a bag of low-sodium soup packets in the mail. That made me laugh for the first time in a while. I also called my neighbor and old friend Raymond. Raymond had been my neighbor for 16 years. We used to play chess on Saturday afternoons on my back porch. His wife had passed 3 years before my surgery and he lived alone now. I told him what was happening and he said he would check on the house while I was gone. He said he still had the spare key I had given him years ago for emergencies. I told him good and that I was glad he did. The surgery was scheduled for a Tuesday in March. I drove myself to the hospital the night before, checked in, and let the nurses do what nurses do. I was not afraid in the way people might imagine. I was something quieter than afraid. I was heavy. I lay there in the hospital bed thinking about all the things I had not said to people, all the lunches I had skipped, all the times I had chosen quiet over conversation because I thought there would always be more time. There is something about lying in a hospital bed before a serious surgery that rearranges your priorities in a very specific and permanent way. The surgery took nearly 7 hours. I do not remember any of it, of course. I only know what Yvette told me afterward, which was that she had driven up the night before and sat in the waiting room for most of those 7 hours with her hands folded in her lap. She said she had called Derek twice to let him know how things were going. He had texted back both times, single-word replies. She told me this without comment, but I could hear something careful in her voice. When I woke up, Yvette was there. She was sitting in the chair beside my bed with a book open in her lap that she clearly had not been reading. When she saw my eyes open, she put the book down immediately and came to the side of the bed. She took my hand and said my name. I tried to say something back, but my throat was too dry and the words came out wrong. She told me I was okay. She told me the surgery had gone well. She told me to rest. I did what she said. I spent 11 days in the hospital. Derek visited twice during that time. Both visits were short, both were during hours when Yvette was not there, and both times he came alone. He sat in the chair, asked how I was feeling, talked for a few minutes about his kids and about work, and then said he had to get back. The second time he came, near the end of my stay, he mentioned that Nora sent her love. I said to tell her thank you. He said he would, then he left. On day 11, the doctors said I could go home. They gave me a list of medications, a follow-up appointment card, and a sheet of instructions about activity levels and what to watch for. Yvette had been staying at a nearby hotel during my hospital stay. She packed up her things, picked me up from the hospital in her car, and drove me home. During the drive, she was quiet in a way that felt different from her usual quietness. She kept looking at the road with a focus that seemed slightly too intense for the conditions. I noticed this, but I was tired and I did not push. When we pulled into my driveway, I saw Derek's car parked on the street. That surprised me a little. I had not expected him to be there. Yvette helped me out of the car and up the front steps slowly. The front door was unlocked. We went inside. The house smelled different. I noticed that right away before anything else. It smelled like someone else's soap, like a different brand of cleaning product. Little things that your nose notices before your brain does. Derek was in the kitchen. He smiled when he saw me and said, "Welcome home, Dad." Nora was there too, which I had not expected. She smiled also, the kind of smile that has something behind it. Their youngest child, a girl named Lily who was 4, was sitting on the floor near the kitchen table with a coloring book. I said hello to all of them, then I said I needed to lie down. Derek said of course. He walked ahead of me toward the hallway and I followed slowly with Yvette at my side. He stopped in front of the door that used to be my bedroom. He opened it. I looked inside. The room was not my room anymore. My bed was gone, my dresser was gone. My nightstand, my reading lamp, the framed photograph of my wife Eleanor that had sat on the windowsill since she passed 9 years ago, all of it was gone. The room had different furniture in it. A crib, a small changing table, soft pink curtains on the windows. It had been turned into a nursery. I stood in the doorway and looked at that room for a long moment. I did not speak. I could feel Yvette go very still beside me. Derek started talking. He said that Nora was pregnant again, that the baby was due in 4 months, and that the kids were already sharing a room at their house and that was too crowded. He said that since I was going to be recovering anyway, and since the guest bedroom was right there, they had thought it made more sense for them to use the master bedroom as a nursery while I was in the hospital, so everything would be ready. He said it very quickly and very smoothly, the way someone says something they have rehearsed. I turned and looked at him, then I looked at Nora. She was standing in the hallway with Lily on her hip, and her expression was one I had seen before. It was the expression of someone who has made a decision and is waiting to see if they are going to face consequences for it. I said very quietly, "Where are my things?" Derek said he had put most of them in the garage. He said my clothes were in the closet in the guest room. He said he had tried to keep everything organized. I asked about Eleanor's photograph. He said he thought it was in a box in the garage with the other items. I said nothing else. I asked Yvette to help me to the guest room. She did. She closed the door behind us. I sat on the edge of the guest room bed and she stood near the window and we were both quiet for a moment. Then she said she had not known. She said she had seen the car in the driveway and thought Derek was just coming to welcome me home. She said she was sorry. I told her it was not her fault. I meant it. That night after Derek and Nora and Lily left, I lay in the guest room and thought about my bedroom. Not about the furniture. I could replace furniture. I thought about Eleanor's photograph. I thought about the fact that someone had gone into a room that held the last 9 years of my grief and my private life and had packed it into a box and put it in a garage and had not asked me. They had not called me at the hospital. They had not asked Yvette. They had simply done it. I thought about the timing. I had been on an operating table with my chest open when this happened. That was when they had decided it was the right moment. Over the next several days, Yvette stayed with me and helped me with medications and meals. She did not bring up the bedroom again directly, but I could see her watching Derek when he came by to check on me, which he did every couple of days, and I could see something careful and measuring in her eyes. She was doing the same thing I was doing, which was remembering and collecting. On the 4th day after I came home, I asked Yvette to help me go out to the garage and find Eleanor's photograph. We found the box it was in after about 20 minutes of looking. The box had been stacked under 2 other boxes, both of which were heavier. When I opened the lid and found the photograph, the glass was cracked, not shattered but cracked diagonally across the lower corner. I picked it up carefully and held it in both hands. Yvette put her arm around my shoulders and did not say anything. There was nothing to say. I brought the photograph inside and put it on the nightstand in the guest room. I looked at Eleanor's face for a while. Then I started to think more clearly than I had since waking up from the surgery. Here is what I knew. The house I lived in was my house. I had paid the mortgage on it for 22 years. Eleanor and I had bought it together in the year we were married. When she passed, the house had become mine fully with no complications because she had wanted it that way and had made sure of it legally. The deed was in my name alone. The house was mine. I also knew that Derek had not asked me. He had not consulted me, not called me while I was recovering in the hospital to say, "Dad, we have this idea about the nursery. What do you think?" He had simply done it while I was unconscious and unable to stop him. And he had said nothing about reversing it. He had presented it as done, as settled, as simply the new arrangement. I thought about what kind of man makes that kind of decision. Then I thought about something else. About 6 months before my surgery, Derek had brought up the house for the first time. It had been casual, slipped into a longer conversation. He had said something about how it was a big house for one person and asked if I had ever thought about what would happen to it eventually. I had said I had a will and that everything was handled. He had nodded and let it drop, but the question had sat in me a little. I had noticed it, the way you notice a knock you cannot explain from somewhere inside the walls of your house. Now I thought about that question differently. I asked Raymond to come for coffee. He sat at my kitchen table while I was still moving slowly and carefully from the surgery, and I told him what had happened with the room. He listened without interrupting, which was what I needed. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment and then he said, "Jack, what are you going to do?" I told him I did not know yet. I told him I was still thinking. He nodded. Then he said something I did not expect. He said he had seen Derek's car at the house twice during the week of my surgery. Twice, not once. He said both times it had been there for at least 2 or 3 hours. I asked Raymond if he had gone inside during those visits. He said no, but he had noticed because he always noticed when cars were at my house when I was not there. He had thought about calling me but had not wanted to worry me in the hospital over nothing. He said he was sorry he had not called. I told him not to be. I told him I was glad to know. 2 visits during the surgery week. That meant the bedroom had not been cleared out in an afternoon. Someone had planned it. Someone had spent time on it. Someone had brought furniture. I want to be careful here about how I say what comes next, because I am not someone who enjoys conflict. I am not someone who likes drama. My whole life I have been the kind of man who tries to let things smooth over, who gives people the benefit of the doubt, who assumes misunderstanding before he assumes bad faith. Eleanor used to say that was one of my best qualities and also one of my most dangerous ones. She was right about that. What I decided, lying in the guest room of my own house with a cracked photograph frame on the nightstand, was that I was done assuming misunderstanding. Derek came by 3 days after the garage trip. He brought Lily with him, which he sometimes did. Lily was a sweet kid who had nothing to do with any of this, and I was glad to see her. She came in and sat with Yvette and showed her the drawing she had made at preschool. Derek sat down at the kitchen table and asked how I was feeling. I told him I was feeling clearer. He said that was good. Then I asked him something I had been preparing to ask. I asked him who had helped him move the furniture. He said a friend. He said a guy he knew had a truck. I asked the name of the friend. He gave me a name I did not recognize, which was fine. I was not looking to involve his friend in anything. I was looking at Derek's face while he answered. He answered smoothly, but his eyes moved to the right for just a moment. The kind of small movement that tells you a person is constructing rather than remembering. I then asked him why he had not called me while I was in the hospital, just to mention what he was planning, just to ask. He said he had not wanted to stress me out. He said I was recovering and that a small thing like where furniture was sitting should not be something I needed to worry about. He called my bedroom furniture a small thing. I heard that. I filed it. I said it was not a small thing. I said it was my room in my house and that whatever furniture was in it or not in it was my decision to make. I said it calmly. I said it with my hands flat on the table. He looked at me and I could see him recalibrating. He had expected something different from me. He had expected the version of me that smoothed things over. He said he was sorry if it upset me, not sorry for doing it, sorry if it upset me. There is a very large difference between those two things, and I want you to understand that I heard that difference clearly. I said we would talk more about the room later, that I was not finished recovering and did not want to have a full conversation while I was still on heart medication. He said of course. He collected Lily, said goodbye to Yvette and left. Yvette came into the kitchen after and looked at me. I told her I was fine. She said she knew. Then she said, "What are you going to do, Jack?" I told her I was going to be very quiet and very patient and very thorough, and that when I was ready I would take one clean action and that would be the end of it. She nodded. She knew what that meant. She had grown up watching me operate that way. 3 weeks after I came home from the hospital, I was well enough to drive short distances and to sit at a desk for more than 20 minutes without tiring. The first thing I did when I was well enough was make an appointment with my attorney. His name is Gerald. He is a man I have used for legal matters for about 15 years. He is careful and thorough and does not use extra words. I sat in Gerald's office and told him everything. He listened. He asked several specific questions. He asked about the deed. I confirmed my name was the only one on it. He asked about the will. I summarized what it said. He asked if Derek had ever asked me to sign anything related to the house. I said no, but that 6 months before my surgery he had asked me what I planned to do with it eventually. Gerald wrote something down and nodded. Gerald told me a few things I needed to hear. He said that what Derek had done, entering my home during my absence and making structural changes to the living arrangement, was not something I was legally required to accept. He said that since the house was in my name and mine alone, any arrangement of the rooms was entirely my decision. He said that if I wanted the nursery removed and my room restored, I had every legal right to demand that. He said I should not wait too long to assert that position, because the longer a situation is allowed to continue, the more it can begin to look like tacit acceptance. I told Gerald I did not plan to wait long. I also told him I wanted to make a change to my will. He asked what change. I told him I wanted to think it through more carefully before committing, but that I wanted him to know I was considering significant adjustments. He said he was ready whenever I was. On the drive home from Gerald's office, I thought about Derek as a child. I thought about things I had not thought about in a long time. I had worked long hours when Derek was young. I had not been as present as I should have been. After Eleanor got sick the first time when Derek was about 12, I had poured myself into managing everything, the house, the medical appointments, my job, and I had not always stopped to sit with my son and just be his father. I carried some guilt about that. I had carried it for years. I think Derek had learned to use that guilt at some point, the way children do when they notice it is there. I also thought about Nora. Nora was not a cruel person. I do not think cruelty was her starting point. I think Nora was a person who was used to getting what she wanted by identifying the easiest path to it and following that path without looking too hard at who was standing in the way. I had seen her operate this way in smaller situations over the years. A family dinner where a restaurant was chosen without asking me. A holiday gathering where plans were announced rather than discussed. These things had seemed minor in isolation. Strung together now, they told a different story. I drove home, I sat in the kitchen, I wrote a list. I am a man who makes lists when I am serious. The list was short, it had 4 things on it. The first thing was to have a direct conversation with Derek about the bedroom. The second thing was to follow through on talking to Gerald about the will. The third thing was to talk to Raymond about what he remembered from those 2 visits. The fourth thing was to tell Yvette everything. I started with Yvette that same evening. She sat across from me at the kitchen table with her tea and she listened. When I finished, she was quiet for a while. Then she said something that surprised me. She said she had been waiting for me to see this clearly for about 3 years. She said it had not been her place to say anything before, but that she had watched Derek and Nora together in relation to me and she had noticed a pattern. She said there had been small moments over the years where decisions had been made that pointed in a specific direction. Toward the house, toward what would happen to it. She said she had never told me because she had not wanted to create conflict between me and my son when there was no immediate crisis. She said she was sorry. I told her there was nothing to be sorry for. Then I told her what Gerald had said and what I was considering doing with the will. She said she was not looking to benefit from any of this. She said she wanted to be clear about that. I told her I knew. She has never once in her whole life asked me for anything. I went to see Raymond the next afternoon. I asked him to tell me again in as much detail as he could remember what he had seen during the week of my surgery. He told me he had seen Derek's car on Tuesday evening, the day of my surgery, and again on Thursday afternoon. He said both times the car had been there for a while. He said on Thursday he had also seen a truck, a dark pickup, backed up to the side of the house near the garage. He said he had watched for a while and had seen 2 men carrying things from the house into the garage. He had seen them carry boxes. He had also seen them carry what he believed was a dresser. My dresser. My hands were steady when he told me this. I was past the point of being surprised. I was only collecting. Raymond said he could write down what he had seen and sign it if I needed that. I told him not yet, but that I was glad he offered. He said whatever I needed. He said I had been a good neighbor and a good man and that sometimes good men let things go too long. I said I agreed with that. That night I called Derek and asked him to come over. Just him, not Nora and not the kids. He said he could come the next evening. He came at 7 and sat at the kitchen table. I had made coffee, which I rarely did in the evening, but I wanted my hands busy. I said I wanted to talk about the room. He said he understood and that he was sorry it had been an adjustment. I said it was not an adjustment. I said it was a removal. I said someone had come into my home and removed my furniture and my possessions while I was in surgery, and that I had a right to know exactly what had happened and to have my space restored. Derek's face changed, not to anger immediately, first to something calculating. He said that the baby was due in 4 months. He said the nursery was already set up. He said it would be a lot of disruption to undo all of that. He said that the guest room was perfectly comfortable and that he had thought I would understand given the circumstances. He said Nora had found it very stressful worrying about me during the surgery and that having a project to focus on had helped her. I let all of that land and then I said, "Do you understand that this is my house?" He said, "Of course." I said, "Then you understand that the arrangement of this house is my decision." He did not answer right away. I said I was giving him 30 days to restore my room. I said I wanted my furniture brought back. I said I wanted Eleanor's photograph frame replaced, and I named a number for what a replacement frame of that quality would cost because I had already looked it up. I said I was not angry. I said I was simply telling him what was going to happen. He looked at me across the table. I could see that he was trying to decide which version of me he was dealing with. Was this the version he could talk past? The version he could make feel guilty? The version that would smooth things over after enough emotional pressure? He said he needed to talk to Nora. I said he had 30 days. He left. I sat at the table for a long time. What happened next was not what I expected, and I say that as someone who thought he had prepared for most possibilities. Derek did not call for 4 days. When he did call, it was not to discuss the room. He asked if we could have a conversation about the house more broadly. I said we could. He came over the following weekend, and this time Nora came too. She sat at the table and folded her hands and looked at me with the expression of someone who has prepared for a meeting. Nora did most of the talking. She said that she and Derek had been thinking about the future, about their growing family, about space and stability. She said that the house I lived in was too large for one person and that it seemed like there was a natural solution available. She said they would like to move. Ian, she said they had thought about the arrangement carefully and felt it could work very well for everyone if I was open to the idea. I looked at her, then I looked at Derek. He was looking at the table. I said, "You would like to move into my house." She said they felt it made sense given the space, and given that I was older and had just had a health scare. I said I had not had a health scare. I said I had had open heart surgery from which I was recovering successfully, and that recovering from surgery did not change the ownership of my property. She began to say something else, and I raised one hand just slightly and she stopped. I said I had been very quiet for a long time. I said I had given people the benefit of the doubt for a long time. I said that was no longer going to be the situation. I said the house was mine, the room was mine, and I wanted my room back within 30 days, as I had already said. I said that any conversation about the future of the house would go through my attorney and would not happen at my kitchen table without proper legal structure. Nora looked at Derek. He still was not looking up. I said thank you for coming. I stood up. They left. That night I called Gerald and told him I was ready to make the changes to the will. He set an appointment for the following week. I also sent Derek a message that evening, not an angry message, a clear one. I said I understood that the conversation had been uncomfortable. I said I hoped he understood that the bedroom situation needed to be resolved within the timeline I had given. I said that after that was done, I was open to continuing to have a relationship with him, with Nora, and with the grandchildren. I said I valued that relationship. But I said I was not going to allow respect for that relationship to cost me the dignity of my own home. I sent the message and put the phone down. He did not reply that night. He replied the next morning, one line. He said he understood. Over the following 2 weeks, I made the changes to my will with Gerald. Those changes were significant. Previously, the house and most of my estate had been structured in a way that would have benefited Derek substantially. I restructured it. I will not go into every detail, but I will say that I made sure Yvette was properly recognized for the years she had quietly shown up, and I made sure that certain assets were placed into a trust with specific conditions attached rather than left as an open transfer. Gerald said the new structure was solid and thorough. I signed everything. I also, during this period, had a conversation with a man named Frank, who had been my financial advisor for about 8 years. I wanted Frank to understand the full picture so that any future conversations Derek might try to have with him about my accounts or investments were met with the appropriate level of caution. Frank listened, asked a few questions, and said he understood completely. He said my accounts were mine and that no one else had any authorization to access or inquire about them. I said I knew that, but that I wanted to be sure he knew the context. He said he appreciated being told. On day 28 of the 30 days I had given Derek, a truck appeared in my driveway. Derek came with 2 men, and over the course of about 3 hours they removed the crib and changing table and the pink curtains and restored my furniture to the room. My bed came back, my dresser came back, my reading lamp came back, the nightstand came back. There was a flat rectangular box that Derek handed me without meeting my eyes. I opened it in the kitchen after they left. It was a new frame. Good quality wood, similar in style to the original. I took Eleanor's photograph and put it in the frame and set it on the windowsill in my room where it had always been. I stood in my room and looked at it. Then I looked around at the room. The walls were slightly different. There were small marks near the baseboard where the crib legs had sat. The smell was different, not bad, just different. But it was my room again. I sat on the edge of my bed and took a slow, careful breath the way the cardiologist had taught me. I thought about Eleanor. I thought about what she would have said about all of this. Eleanor was a woman who loved without limits but also without illusions. She had loved Derek deeply. She had also, near the end of her life, said something to me quietly one evening that I had not fully understood at the time. She had said, "Jack, love your children, but do not mistake love for obedience." I had nodded and not thought too much about it. Now I thought about it constantly. In the weeks that followed, something shifted. Derek stopped coming by casually. His visits became shorter, more formal. He was polite when he came. He asked about my recovery. He did not bring up the house again. Nora did not come. The grandchildren came occasionally, which I was glad for. I made sure the relationship with them stayed warm and consistent because they were children, and they were not responsible for any of this. Yvette came to visit for a long weekend. She helped me repaint one of the walls in the living room, a project I had been putting off for 2 years. We painted on a Saturday and ordered food in the evening and sat on the back porch the way I used to sit with Raymond, and she told me about her life, her work, the man she had been seeing who seemed kind. I listened. It felt good to listen to someone who was not asking me for anything. Raymond came for chess on a Saturday for the first time in months. I had not been up for it during recovery, and he had respected that without making me feel guilty. We played for about 2 hours and I lost both games, which was not unusual, and we talked about small things and some bigger things, and it felt like a normal afternoon, which was what I needed it to feel like. About 2 months after the room was restored, Derek called me. It was a Sunday evening. He asked if I wanted to have dinner sometime that week. I said yes. We met at a restaurant halfway between our houses. He was already there when I arrived. We ordered and ate and talked about the kids, about his job, about my follow-up appointments with the cardiologist, which had been going well. It was a good dinner in most of the ways that mattered. Comfortable mostly. Not like it used to be, but not cold either. Near the end of the meal, Derek said something. He said he was sorry. He said it plainly and without too much around it. He said he had told himself he was doing something practical, something that made sense for the family, and that he had not thought about what it would feel like from where I was sitting. He said he had been wrong. He said the timing had been wrong and the way he had done it had been wrong and he should have asked. I looked at my son. He is 38 years old and he has his mother's eyes. I saw something in those eyes that I had not seen in a long time, which was something simple and young. Something that remembered being 12 and afraid and not knowing how to ask his father to stop working and just sit with him. I told him I appreciated him saying that. I told him I had not handled everything in my life perfectly either, that there were years when I had not been the father I should have been, and that I understood things were complicated between us. I said I did not want to carry this as a permanent wound between us. I said what I needed was for him to understand, really understand, that my home was my home, that my space was my space. That my dignity was not something that could be moved into a garage while I was unconscious. He said he understood. He said he really did. I said good, and then I said one more thing. I said I had made some changes to how I had structured certain things legally, and that I had done that not to punish him, but because I needed to make decisions from a clear and honest place rather than from the place of someone who was avoiding discomfort. I said none of those changes were permanent in the way that the future is permanent. I said the future was still open. But I said the openness of that future depended on things being different between us. He was quiet, then he nodded. We paid the check. We stood in the parking lot. He hugged me, which he had not done in a long time. I hugged him back. It was not everything, but it was something. I want to tell you now about the months after that dinner because the story does not end at the restaurant. Life does not end at a single conversation. Real change, real consequences, real relationships, they all move slowly and in more than one direction. What I found in the months that followed was that something in Derek had genuinely shifted. He started calling more. He started asking before making plans that involved me. He asked once if he could bring Nora's family to use the backyard for a birthday party for Lily, and he asked me in advance, and he asked as a question, not as a plan he was announcing. I said yes. The party was fine. Lily ran around the yard and blew out 4 candles and got frosting on her chin, and it was a good afternoon. Nora was different too. She was not warm in the way that felt natural. She was polite the way people are polite when they have been corrected. There was a formality between us that had not been there before, or perhaps that had been there before but covered over by the assumption that nothing would ever be said. Now that something had been said, the formality was visible. I was comfortable with that. I did not need Nora to love me. I needed her to respect the parameters of the space I occupied. There was also this. About 3 months after the dinner with Derek, Nora's mother came to stay with them for a few weeks after a health issue of her own. Their house was cramped. Derek did not ask me if Nora's mother could stay at my house. He did not suggest it, did not float the idea, did not hint at it. He managed the situation within his own home. That told me a great deal about what had actually been absorbed. My cardiologist cleared me for full activity at the 4-month checkup. My heart was healing properly. He said I was doing better than many patients his age, which made me smile. I drove home from that appointment feeling something I can only describe as spacious. Like the walls had moved back a little, like there was more room to breathe. I went home and sat in my room. I looked at Eleanor's photograph. I thought about the last few months. I thought about what it had cost me to stay quiet for so long and what it had cost me when I finally stopped staying quiet. The strange thing I had found was that the cost of speaking was much lower than I had expected. I had feared it would damage everything. It had not. It had changed things, yes. It had made some things harder. But it had also made the things that remained feel more real, more honest, more solid. I have thought a lot since then about the nature of silence, about what it does when you use it for too long to protect a peace that is not real. The peace in my family before all of this was not real. It was the peace of things that are not being spoken. The peace of a wound that is being covered rather than closed. I had lived in that peace for years because it was easier and because I loved my son and I did not want to burn anything down. What I had not understood until that moment in the doorway of my converted bedroom, my chest still fragile from surgery, looking at a crib in the place where my bed used to be, was that the burning had already happened. I had not set the fire, but I had been standing in the smoke for a long time telling myself it was fog. I am 63 years old. I have had my chest opened and my heart repaired, and I have stood in my own doorway and felt the specific humiliation of knowing someone chose a comfortable nursery over a recovering man's dignity. I have sat across from my son and told the truth without raising my voice. I have held a cracked photograph frame in both hands and felt something settle in me, something that had been unsettled for a very long time. I do not tell this story to make my son look like a villain. He is not. He is a man who made choices that came from a place I partly understand, a place built from years of complicated family history and a marriage to someone who sees opportunity where others see obligation. He made wrong choices. He knows that now. Whether that knowledge changes things going forward is something only time will answer. I tell this story because I know there are other people sitting with a version of this. People who are the dependable one, the stable one, the one who keeps the peace, the one who smooths things over, the one who swallows something quietly and tells themselves it is okay. People who have been carrying the weight of someone else's comfort on their own shoulders for so long that they have forgotten what it feels like to set it down. If you're that person, I want you to hear this from me, Jack, a man who took too long to learn it himself. Your loyalty is not an invitation. Your patience is not a license. Your silence is not consent. You are allowed to speak. You are allowed to draw a line. You are allowed to say, this is mine, this is my space, this is my dignity, and I am not moving it into a garage for anyone. You are allowed to do all of that without becoming a hard or cruel or angry person. You can be warm and clear at the same time. You can love people and still hold the boundary. The two things are not opposites. My heart is healed. My room is mine again. Eleanor's photograph is on the windowsill in the right frame where it belongs. I play chess with Raymond on Saturday afternoons. Yvette calls me every few days. My son is learning slowly what respect actually looks like. The grandchildren come by and make noise in the yard and leave toys on the porch, and that is enough. That is more than enough. This is what clarity feels like. This is what happens when a quiet man finally speaks. Before you go, I want to ask you something honest. Have you ever been the person who kept the peace so long that keeping the peace started costing you yourself? Have you ever found something missing, something moved, something taken, and told yourself it was not worth a fight because you did not want to damage the relationship? If that sounds familiar, I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments what you would have done in Jack's place. Would you have stayed quiet? Would you have spoken sooner? Would you have walked away completely? This channel is about the moments when silence ends and something true begins. Your story matters here.